In 1978, the greatest darts player in the world took home a winner's cheque, smaller than his bar tab, £3,000 for a night in a smoky cabaret. 40 years later, teenage professionals sign contracts worth £20 million, and they drink protein shakes, not pints. How did a game traded for beer and glory create millionaires, shatter legends, and leave a trail of bodies before age 65? What happened in British darts that nobody talks about, but everyone paid for? The true cost begins with the forgotten man who won it all and vanished. Leighton Rees stepped up to the Oach at Jolly's Cabaret Club in Stoke-on-Trent, nerves steady, smoke swirling through beams of stage light. The air was thick with the smell of beer and sweat. The crowd packed in tight, voices booming for their favourites. It was January 1978, the first ever World Professional Darts Championship, and Rees, a quiet Welshman from the Rhondda, was about to make history. He beat John Lowe 18 legs to 7, and for a moment the world of darts belonged to him. The prize was a cheque for £3,000, a sum that barely raised eyebrows even then, less than what some regulars could run up on a heavy night at the bar. The cheque itself looked almost comically small in his hands, lost amid the haze and noise. Most of the players in that room still worked day jobs. Rees, before darts, had been a lorry driver and sheet metal worker. There were no agents or six-figure contracts, brewery sponsors, covered events, their logos plastered on shirts and boards. But the real currency was pride and pints. Cash prizes were modest, but pub teams might get crates of beer or a bar tab, covered just for showing up. In local leagues, a win could mean a few pounds and a couple of free rounds. For the pros, even the world champion, the money did not stretch far. Rees's £3,000 was not invested or multiplied. He went home to Wales, spent his winnings quietly, and soon faded from the headlines. Sid Waddell, the BBC commentator and poet of the darts world, captured the moment with a line that stuck. When Alexander was 33, he cried salt tears, no more worlds to conquer. For Rees, there would be no more worlds. He played on but never reached those heights again. The glory of that night at Jolie's belonged to the pubs and the people, not to the bank accounts of the men on stage. Leighton Rees, the first world champion, died in 2003 at age 63, remembered by few outside those smoky rooms. The game had given him a brief crown, but little else. Darts exploded out of the pubs and into the living rooms of Britain when the BBC rolled its cameras into places like Jolly's. Suddenly, what had been a smoky local ritual became national entertainment. The logistics were simple, but the impact was huge. A few cameras, a haze of cigarette smoke, and a crowd that sounded like a football terrace squeezed into a nightclub. The BBC decision to broadcast the 1978 World Championship turned everyday pub players into household names almost overnight. Sid Waddell, with his wild Geordie wit, brought poetry to the Oach. His words soared above the clatter of pint glasses. When Alexander was 33, he cried salt tears, no more worlds to conquer. Sid's metaphors made legends out of lorry drivers and metalworkers, spinning their nerves and bravado into national drama. Viewers at home hung on every dart, every line, every pint raised in the background. Television did not just show the game, it changed it. For the first time, millions could watch the tension build, see the sweat on Rees's brow, hear the crowd's roar echo through their own front rooms. In the late 70s, finals drew audiences of up to 18 million, numbers that rivaled the FA Cup or the Grand National. Darts became a shared spectacle, a ritual that united families and friends on winter nights. Brewery sponsors watched their brands beam across the nation, their logos as familiar as the faces on the Oach. Cash prizes might have been small, but the real rewards were measured in free rounds and crates of beer sent to winning teams. Some nights, it seemed like the breweries were paying out as much in pints as in pounds. The sport's roots stayed tangled in pub life, even as the cameras rolled and the stakes inched higher. Sid's voice, half mischief, half magic, captured it all. He did not just commentate, he mythologized. In those early broadcasts, darts was still a game for the people, played for pride and pints, but now it belonged to everyone with a television and a taste for drama. Eric Bristow walked into the world of darts like he owned it. Born in Hackney in 1957, he was out of school by 14, already running with a crowd that knew more about lockups than libraries. By 15, he was earning more on the dartboard than proofreading invoices, so he quit the day job and never looked back. The pubs of London became his training ground, his stage, and his kingdom. His throw was sharp, but his edge came from somewhere deeper, a swagger built on pints and bravado. He earned the nickname Crafty Cockney, not just for his cockiness, but for the way he could read a room, rattle an opponent, and still have time to finish his pint before the next leg. Bristow did not just play darts, he dominated it. In 1980, at just 23, he beat Bobby George for his first world title. Over the next 6 years, he racked up 5 world championships, 22 major titles, and held the world #1 spot for a decade. By age 29, he was already a legend, and he collected an MBE in 1989. But behind every trophy was a ritual that seemed almost impossible. Bristow never played a sober match in his life. His partner Jane later said he drank 10 to 15 pints of Guinness a day, every day for 30 years. He would start before the TV cameras rolled, keep going between sets, and finish the night long after the last dart had landed. Never did the pint feel like mere theatre. It was fuel and armour. The crowds loved him. He stared down opponents with a cold confidence. Pint in one hand, dart in the other. The TV cameras caught the sweat, the smirk, the steady hand that never seemed to shake. At least not on the outside. Sid Waddell put it in his own way. When Alexander was 33, he cried salt tears. Eric was only 27. Youth and dominance made him feel untouchable, and every victory was punctuated by excess. By the mid-1980s, Bristow was the face of a sport that was still half pub and half television spectacle. He proved that raw talent, sharpened by the rituals of the bar, could conquer the world stage. But the same rituals that built him up carried a weight, a cost that would soon become impossible to ignore. Andy Fordham lumbered to the O'Shea, a mountain in blue, eyes glassy but hands steady. He tipped the scales at 434 pounds, but it was his drinking that truly staggered the imagination. Before the 2004 World Final, Fordham downed 24 bottles of lager and a double brandy, then walked out and played like a man possessed. The crowd roared him on, half in awe, half in disbelief. Fordham wasn't alone in his success. Darts had its rogues gallery, and each came with their own rituals. Jocky Wilson, the pride of Fife, was never seen without a cigarette hanging from his lips. He chain smoked through matches, flicking ash between throws, the smoke curling around his head like a crown. Wilson won 2 world titles, 1982 and 1989, fueled by nerves and nicotine. Offstage, diabetes took his teeth, but on stage he was indestructible, a folk hero in a battered cardigan. Bobby George made his entrance like a rock star, gold chains glinting, candelabra held high. He strutted to the O'Shea as if the whole world was his living room, pausing to take a swig between his legs. George never won the big one, but he didn't need to. He turned every match into theatre, every walk on into a show. The fans adored him, not for trophies, but for the spectacle, the rings, the banter, the bravado. In those days, brewery sponsors were everywhere. Logos on shirts, banners above the boards, pints stacked along the stage. The culture wasn't just accepted, it was celebrated. Players were paid in pride pints and sometimes crates of beer. Drinking wasn't a vice, it was part of the job description. At its peak, darts finals drew 18 million viewers on the BBC. more than the FA Cup, more than the Grand National. Families crowded around the television, shouting at the screen, living every leg with their heroes. The O'Shea was a stage and the country was hooked. The game was wild, unpredictable, and larger than life. But behind the laughter and the lager, something darker was brewing. The excess that made these men legends would soon come calling for its due. November 1986, the Swedish Open. Eric Bristow stepped up to throw, the crowd expecting another display of dominance. Instead, his hand locked around the dart. For 1.5 seconds, an eternity at the O'Shea, he could not let go. The dart clung to his fingers, muscles refusing to obey. Spectators watched in confusion, then disbelief. Bristow, the man who had stared down everyone, could not release a basic throw. Dartitis, the name given to this sudden paralysis, is not a physical injury but a psychological block. It strikes without warning, turning confidence into panic. For Bristow, it was a silent ambush. He later described it simply: "Does your brains in, cannot fix it." The swagger, the bravado, the certainty that had fueled 5 world titles vanished in a single moment. Friends and rivals saw the change immediately. The man who had never blinked now hesitated, his hand hovering nervously before every throw. His ranking tumbled. Tournament wins dried up. He was 29 and the sport's most intimidating force was suddenly vulnerable. But Bristow's story did not stop at personal collapse. In the middle of his own crisis, he noticed a quiet, determined player working in a Stoke on Trent ceramic factory for £52 a week. Phil Taylor had talent, but no means to go professional. Bristow wrote a cheque for £10,000, enough to cover Taylor's first year on the circuit. In that gesture, Bristow handed over more than money. He passed the torch to a new generation, one that would transform the game in ways no one could predict. The 1986 freeze ended the myth of invincibility. It exposed how fragile greatness could be, even for the most fearless. Behind the headlines and the hard drinking, there was always a risk. One bad match, one locked hand, and the empire could vanish. Bristow's fall cleared a path for Taylor, but it also showed every player that the line between legend and lost could be crossed in a heartbeat. On the morning of January 7th, 1993, the world of darts changed. 16 of the sport's biggest names, including Eric Bristow, Phil Taylor, John Lowe, and Dennis Priestley, and every living world champion, sat shoulder to shoulder behind a table, eyes fixed on the future. In front of them was one statement: they would not play under the British Darts Organisation again. This was a moment of change. The British Darts Organisation had refused to raise prize money or modernise. The biggest championship still paid £36,000 to the winner, far less than tennis or snooker, and television coverage was drying up. Players were tired of empty promises and shrinking crowds. The demand for bigger prize money was loud and public. The group formed the World Darts Council, soon to become the Professional Darts Corporation, determined to take control of their own careers. The British Darts Organisation responded by banning the rebels from every tournament it controlled. For the players, this was no idle threat. Their livelihoods, their reputations, their place in the game's history were suddenly at risk. But the rebels had a secret weapon: a television deal with Sky Sports brokered by Barry Hearn, a promoter with a talent for turning sports into gold mines. Hearn saw what the British Darts Organisation did not: a new audience, new sponsors, and a chance to create stars. He promised the players not just survival, but riches. The difference was immediate. Within a year, the new PDC World Championship offered a total prize fund of £82,000. Still modest, but the trajectory was set. By the late 1990s, the winner's cheque had climbed to £30,000, then £50,000, then £100,000. The PDC poured money into staging, lights, and spectacle. The Circus Tavern in Essex became the new home of darts, its stage bathed in blue neon and pounding music. The old world of smoky pubs and pints gave way to a new era of television drama. Barry Hearn's business sense transformed the sport. He negotiated bigger television contracts, brought in new sponsors, and pushed prize money past £200,000 for a single tournament, a fourfold leap from what the British Darts Organisation had ever offered. Players once paid in pride and pints now played for real fortunes. The British Darts Organisation clung to tradition, but the audience followed the money. The walkout split the game in two, and it set the stage for darts to become a global business. The Civil War was brutal, but the rewards for those who took the risk were unprecedented. The age of the millionaire darts player had begun. Phil Taylor's name became synonymous with darts dominance. Born in Stoke-on-Trent, he started out earning £52 a week in a ceramic factory, but by the end of his career, he had won 16 world titles, 87 major tournaments, and pocketed over £7 million in prize money. No one else came close. His throw was mechanical, relentless, almost hypnotic. Opponents wilted under the pressure. In 2009, Taylor set a record that remains untouched, a 118.663 dart average against Gary Anderson, a number so high it bordered on the unreal. For nearly 3 decades, he turned finals into routines and rivals into footnotes. But the numbers only tell half the story. Taylor's rise from working-class roots to sporting royalty was paved with sacrifices that never made the highlight reels. The relentless travel, the tunnel vision, the obsession with perfection, these came at a cost. In 2001, Taylor faced a public reckoning when he was convicted of assault after an incident in a bar. The court fined him and ordered community service. The fallout was immediate. His MBE, awarded for services to darts, was annulled. Sponsors hesitated, and headlines shifted from his precision on the Oach to his personal life. For a man who had built his reputation on control, the loss of honour stung as much as any defeat. The cracks widened at home. By 2016, Taylor's marriage had ended. His daughters, Kelly and Natalie, spoke openly about feeling abandoned, living on state benefits while their father collected trophies. The distance between the man on stage and the family he left behind grew wider with every tournament. Taylor's focus on darts had made him unbeatable, but it also made him absent. The pursuit of greatness left little room for anything else. Even as the money and accolades piled up, Taylor's body began to fail him. Years of standing under hot lights, the strain of competition, and the grind of constant travel took their toll. In May 2025, he announced his retirement, citing failing health, hip and eye surgeries, persistent pain, and fatigue that would not lift. The king of the Oach, who had once seemed untouchable, now struggled with the simplest routines. The roar of the crowd faded, replaced by the quiet realities of age and injury. Phil Taylor's legacy is etched in record books, but the cost of that legacy is written in court records, family interviews, and the long silent stretches after the lights go down. He redefined what a darts player could achieve, but the price was paid in more than just sweat. For every £1 million earned, there was something lost: honour, relationships, health. In chasing perfection, Taylor reached heights no one else has touched, but he also showed how steep the climb can be and how lonely it is at the top. January 2007, Alexandra Palace shook with noise, lights, and the kind of tension only darts could produce. Phil Taylor, already a man on his way to 16 world titles, faced Raymond van Barneveld, the Dutchman who had chased this moment for years. The match was broadcast live, millions watching across Europe, every throw magnified by expectation. Taylor had already built his legend, but Van Barneveld was the outsider with nerves of steel and a nation behind him. The final went the distance, 6 sets each, nothing to separate them. Sudden death. Taylor opened with a perfect leg, but Van Barneveld answered dart for dart, refusing to blink. Every triple 20 drew a gasp, every missed double a groan. In the last leg, Van Barneveld steadied himself, checked out on double top, and collapsed to his knees. The Dutch fans erupted. Taylor, stunned, could only watch as Van Barneveld lifted the trophy. 7-6, the greatest final ever played. and for a moment the world belonged to Van Barneveld. That win changed everything for Van Barneveld. In the Netherlands, he became a hero overnight, with endorsement deals, magazine covers, and a surge in Dutch darts clubs. For a few years, he was the man who had toppled the unbeatable. But the glory was short-lived. Taylor, wounded, came back harder. Over the next decade, he beat Van Barneveld again and again, in major finals and on televised stages, restoring the old order. Off the stage, the cost of that one night in 2007 began to show. Van Barneveld's marriage, already strained by years on the road and the pressure of fame, collapsed in 2019. Dutch court filings confirmed he lost nearly 60% of his wealth in the divorce. By 2024, at age 57, he was ranked 36th in the world, no longer a contender, but unable to walk away. Vincent van der Voort said that for Barney, it is financial. He has to play. The man who once brought a nation to its feet now played on for money, not glory. Taylor retired with millions in the bank. Van Barneveld, once the king of sudden death, kept chasing the next payday, the next brief taste of what he had in 2007. The greatest match ever played left scars as deep as any trophy, a reminder that in darts, the line between legend and struggle is never as clear as it looks on the scoreboard. Leighton Rees faded from the headlines long before his body gave out. In June 2003, age 63, liver failure ended his quiet years in Ronda. The first world champion, gone before most fans remembered his name. Forgotten became his afterword. He was not alone. Jocky Wilson, the pride of Fife, vanished from the circuit in 1995. He was found dead in March 2012, age 62, after years spent alone, his health broken by decades of smoking and diabetes. The man once cheered by millions died in silence. The last applause long faded, alone under that memory. Sid Waddell, the voice who gave the game its poetry, lost his fight with cancer in August 2012. He was 72. For many, his commentary was the soul of darts, a link to the warmth and chaos of the pub era. His passing left the game quieter, the Osh a lonelier place. Eric Bristow, the crafty Cockney, battled on long after the headlines stopped. In April 2018, he wrote in his diary the words, "Heart, go and explode." That night he collapsed on the pavement, cigarette half rolled in his hand, dead at 60. He had long said he was never sober. The price of that life was clear. Andy Fordham, who once drank 24 beers before a final, lasted until July 2021. By then, his liver was 75% destroyed. He died at 59, years younger than the men who once cheered him on television. Liver failure marked another bright career cut short. Across 2 generations, the pattern is impossible to ignore. 5 legends, Leighton, Jocky, Sid, Eric and Andy, all gone before 65. Their bodies bore the weight of a culture that celebrated excess and then looked away from the bill. The price of pride, of pints, of standing under the lights for one more leg, was paid in years stolen and farewells said too soon. The game moved on, but the cost stayed, written in the record books and in the memories of those who watched their heroes fall. 12 people sat scattered across rows of empty seats at the Lakeside Country Club, their applause echoing in a room built for hundreds. This was the final British Darts Organisation World Championship, January 2020. The sport's oldest institution, once the pride of a working-class Britain, now faced its last act in near silence. Where cameras once panned across packed crowds and banners waved for legends, the lens now struggled to find faces in the gloom. The British Darts Organisation had ruled darts for nearly 50 years. In the 1980s, Lakeside was electric. Viewership rivaled football, and the world's best queued for a chance at the stage. But the world changed around them. The Professional Darts Corporation, born from rebellion and commercial ambition, pulled the spotlight away. Prize money soared elsewhere. Sponsors vanished. The British darts organisation clung to tradition, but tradition could not pay the bills. By 2020, the warning signs had become impossible to ignore. Ticket sales for the final collapsed, barely a dozen supporters in attendance, a crowd smaller than a local pub league. The British Darts organisation's own paperwork, later released in bankruptcy filings, told the rest of the story. More than £500,000 owed, debts mounting, no rescue in sight. The organisation that once boasted 30,000 members and televised finals with 18 million viewers was now insolvent, its legacy boxed up in legal documents and memories. Players who had stayed loyal watched the decline with disbelief. Some left for the Professional Darts Corporation in time to salvage their careers. Others stayed, hoping for a revival that never came. Glenn Durrant, the last British Darts organisation champion in 2019, took his trophy and immediately switched sides. The message was clear: the future and the money belonged elsewhere. The final curtain fell not with cheers, but with a quiet shuffle of chairs. The British Darts organisation's end was not a dramatic collapse, but a slow, public unravelling. The institution that had once brought darts into the nation's living rooms died almost alone, outlived by the players and fans who remembered what it once was. In the silence of that empty hall, the old world of darts passed into history. The story of Luke Littler begins with a £1 dartboard from a pound shop handed to him at 18 months old. By the age of 6, he was hitting perfect 180 scores. At 13, he threw his first 9-darter, a feat that once took legends a career to achieve. In December 2023, bookmakers listed him as a 66-1 outsider, ranked 164th in the world. He was a teenager with a borrowed nickname and a game built in quiet rooms, not smoky pubs. The transformation from pub backrooms to global arenas was complete by the time Luke stepped onto the main stage. In January 2025, at just 17 years and 347 days, he became the youngest world champion in history, defeating Michael van Gerwen and collecting a £500,000 cheque. 12 months later, he returned and demolished Jan van Veen, pocketing the first ever £1 million winner's prize. The leap from Leighton Rees's £3,000 in 1978 to Littler's £1 million, an increase of 333 times, was not just a number, it was a new world. By 2026, the numbers were dizzying. Littler signed a 10-year sponsorship deal worth £20 million, the richest contract darts had ever seen. At 18, his career earnings stood at £2.77 million, more than most champions had made in a lifetime. Michael van Gerwen, the Dutch powerhouse who once set the gold standard, had amassed £11.5 million over a decade of dominance. Littler was on pace to double that before his 20s were out. Yet the riches came with a different kind of solitude. The new breed of darts, professional trains with nutritionists and psychologists, not pints and pub laughter. Littler, now world number 1, celebrated alone on his Xbox, his face lit not by stage lights, but by a screen in a silent room. Crowds that once roared for pub heroes now turned hostile, booing as the money and fame grew. The cheers of the old days had become something colder. In 50 years, darts had gone from a smoky, communal ritual to a high-stakes contest where the winner could walk away richer than most footballers and lonelier too. Today, dart champions sign deals worth £20 million, but every modern throw lands in the shadow of legends lost before 65, sacrificed to an era of excess that built the sport. As packed arenas shrink to 12 fans or swell to millions online, the real question is whether greatness now comes at the cost of connection. In chasing fortune, darts gained the world, and sometimes it still feels like it lost its soul. Share your thoughts below.